Why don't we go ahead and get started? Yeah, let's do that. All right. So, good afternoon to all of you who have joined us and to those who will be joining us for today's Rising Up Virtual Roundtable. I'm Kathy Lowry. I head up the fundraising for Rising Up, and I'm joined by Nicole Garut, who is the marketing coordinator for Rising Up, and she's also the production manager for our virtual roundtables. And today's session is all about Rising Up, how it started, how it works, the progress we've made, and the promise ahead for the young people and for the program itself. We're doing this in the format of a shared conversation between Sherilyn Adams, who is the Executive Director of Larkin Street Youth Services, and Jackie Martinez, who is the Assistant Director of Care Coordination at Five Keys Schools and Programs, which is in fact one of the organizations that is a Rising Up partner. We all know Sherilyn as one of the most impactful and effective voices, I'd say, in the country on behalf of young people who are homeless. And Jackie has been working at Five Keys for 6 years, and she has deep and broad experience working with young people, and in particular with the young people who are participating in Rising Up's rapid rehousing program. Miriam Mudaroglu, who's going to be closing out our session, is a highly effective community activist and philanthropist, and she's also a member of the Rising Up Committee. So please note, first of all, we are being recorded. If you have questions as Sherilyn and Jackie are talking, please put them in the chat box, and we will address them during the Q&A session towards the end. A few of the basic logistics that are part of any of these Zoom sessions. Please keep yourselves on mute. Again, put your questions in the chat box. During the Q&A, when we actually have it, if you want to, you can actually raise your hand sort of virtually, as we do sometimes in these sessions, or you can use the emoji, or you can put them in the chat box. We'll make sure that they all get addressed, and if not, we'll follow up and respond after the session. We are going to be sending out a survey after this, and we would love to have your feedback, both in terms of how we can run these in a better way, as well as what other subjects you want to hear about. So with that, I am going to turn this over to Sherilyn and Jackie.
Thanks, Kathy. Thanks everyone for joining. I'm going to just do a little brief sort of presentation or some slides on homelessness in general amongst young people, and then talk a little bit about Rising Up. And then hopefully what's going to happen is Jackie and I are going to be in a bit of a dialogue about some of the changes we've made and the progress we've made, and some of the experiences of young people that are participating in the Rising Up program. And then we will open it up. So just bear with me for a few slides, and then we'll get to some discussion. I think many of you on this call may know this, but just to keep us grounded in the numbers of young people impacted by homelessness in our country, 1 in 10 youth between the ages of 18 and 25 experience homelessness at least once over the course of a year in the United States, and that is actually there's a bit of a change in that number. It's 1 in 10 young people between 18 and 35, and 1 in 30 young people between the ages of 14 and 18, so unaccompanied minors is 1 in 30, and this is 1 in 10, just a little more data points. 1 in 3 young people experiencing homelessness have at some point in their life in the state experience homelessness. California has the highest rate of youth homelessness of any state in the country. And in San Francisco, about 1,100 young people and young people between the ages of 18 and 25 and unaccompanied youth experienced, we're in the point in time count in 2019, which was the last time that we did a point in time count. And that was, Rising Up was launched by Mayor Breed in late 2018, early 2019. Our goal, as folks know, is to reduce youth homelessness by 50% by 2023, with a focus on youth of color, particularly Black and Brown youth, and LGBTQ youth. Next slide. A public-private partnership, as you know, like what is that? So that is really working with all of the government, public funding offices in the city to think about having a systems approach and to try to work together to coordinate our response to young people experiencing homelessness. The lead agency is obviously the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing. A number of nonprofits that work in the space with young people and have for a long time are also a part of Rising Up. So that's the private part of the public-private partnership. They are listed in addition to the organizations listed here, because Rising Up includes really the prevention activities and includes work around our coordinated entry system. All of the access points for coordinated entry are also sort of partners, if you will, in the work. So that includes Homeless Youth Alliance, the Lyric, the center, the LGBT Center, and Huckleberry Youth Programs. So all of us also work together in the prevention and arm of this work, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. Next slide. So we've talked to you, I think if you've been to any of these, anything to do with Rising Up, you have seen this slide. So really Rising Up is about two sets of interventions, problem solving and rapid rehousing, which you see in the center of this slide. It is also about the launch of the coordinated entry system for young people, which is a way in which we prioritize what kinds of housing options are available for young people. Lots is changing and needs to change around coordinated entry. But at the beginning of Rising Up, one of the key elements was really to ensure that we were expanding access to young people across the city to get assessed for housing. And that's where we came across those 6 access points I just talked about. Once a young person touches those access points, then we begin to look at whether they need problem-solving support or prevention services. Do they need some help with rent? Do they need help with transportation? Is there something else, something that can be offered to them to help resolve homelessness or prevent homelessness? And then our housing strategy is really the rapid rehousing. So this added to a set of other housing options we have for young people in our city. Not enough then, still not enough, but a huge boost to have rapid rehousing available for up to 400 young people. And that's a time-limited, subsidy-based support for young people who live in their own apartments. And then wrapping support services around young people, both in the problem-solving and in the who are in rapid rehousing. And really importantly, Rising Up really sought to coordinate services and organizations and the work across the homelessness response system better to ultimately improve the impact and outcomes for young people. Next slide. So our goals, as I mentioned a little bit, were to serve about, over the course of Rising Up by 2023, serve about 450 young people with problem solving and prevention services, and house about 400 young people with the ultimate goals, as you see, that those problem solving and prevention strategies work and 90% remain stably housed. And then after the rapid rehousing intervention, that young people, 85% stay housed. Next slide. So what have we done in the past couple of years in the middle of this pandemic? We have had 1,482 conversations with young people, and we've done what we consider to be 166 resolutions. Those are jargony terms. We can talk more about that, but that's really on that prevention side. It's really the organizations working at the access points to really, by all means necessary, ensure that young people can stay where they are or get the help that they need so that they don't fall into homelessness. And we've housed 240 young people across all of the housing providers. And we have an additional 86 in housing search, so looking to find a place with brilliant corners. 47 young people, 47% are employed, 25% are seeking employment, and 73 have exited from the program or completed their subsidies and stayed in their housing. That's what we mean by exited. For some young people, they may have moved into a different solution, but they have exited and are stable. Our goal is to help a 900, as you see, by 2023. So we are well on our way. I think what's important to note, particularly about the percentage employed, is this is over the course of this pandemic, right? So we saw a lot of young people super struggle around employment for all the obvious reasons. So we're pretty proud of this number, even though we have a long way to go to making sure everybody is employed and able to have economic mobility. Next slide.
Sherilyn, could I add a little bit about employment for this piece?
Yes, jump in, Jackie.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. So for the employment during COVID, there were many moving pieces, as you know, many places shut down, and we weren't able to keep people employed. During this time, we were able to get clients trained up. And so one example is of Devontae, who last week got a job because he was out, he had a security position, then COVID shut down that building. His training expired. And so what the case managers did in the interim was got him trained up, got him some new boots, and we're ready to go. So now when the job market kind of started opening up again, now that we're, I don't know what to call this, semi-post COVID, I know middle of new Delta COVID. Now that we're here, we're able to get them into positions, and he actually was employed this week. So just want to add that in there.
That's great, Jackie. That's a great story. And I think that so captures, right, the work that staff and case managers and folks were doing, right? For folks that lost jobs or couldn't stay in the jobs that they were in, what supports could be provided. That's awesome. Thanks. Next slide. So this just gives you a little sense of the race and ethnicity of young people that we're serving. So about 58% of young people in Rising Up are Black or African American, 24% identify as Latinx, and then sort of a small mix of other young people, and about 15% white. Next slide. It's important, I think, on the demographic slides for both gender identity, sexual orientation, and race and ethnicity, is that what we see is that that for the most part on race and ethnicity, the young people in the Rising Up program mirror the demographics of the young people that are experiencing homelessness in San Francisco. That's really important, right? We have just because of structural racism, because of homophobia and transphobia, we see disproportionate number of Black, Latinx, and queer and trans young people impacted by homelessness. So it was really important as we were rolling out Rising Up, and as we're really trying to build a better system for addressing youth homelessness in our city and hopefully beyond, that really we're ensuring that the services are getting to those most impacted, and that the ways in which we're operating that are allowing folks, or are really intended to be responsive to the needs of youth of color and of queer and trans youth. So for LGBTQ youth, we see about almost 30% identify as gay or bisexual, and about 2.5% are trans. That's an underrepresentation. So we've been really working over the past year or so to look at what we need to do to increase and make sure that we are appropriately serving the needs of LGBTQ youth. A part of the issue in the data that we're continuing to work with is the coordinated entry system is not very flexible with changing information once it's originally been put in. So it's sometimes youth don't disclose their sexual orientation or gender identity initially, or that may shift or change. It's a fluid at this age, and it doesn't necessarily get captured in the data. So we are working to resolve that. Next slide. So I think we're gonna take down the slides for a minute after I just speak a little bit on this, and I'm gonna ask Jackie to really talk about how she's seen some of these changes that we've made in the program and in Rising Up. So as we have looked over the past couple of years and now been operating Rising Up for a while, particularly the housing programs, we we understood that we had come to understand, and some of this will not be a surprise to people like Rod, who've been around for half a minute in the work, is that we really needed to expand some services and programming for young people, both because of COVID, but also just because we needed to add a few more enhanced supports. That included some conflict resolution and mediation. Some young people are living in roommate situations, and both because of COVID, right? Because now we're all together all the time. We really needed to work with young people and provide the ability for folks to sort of learn how you navigate roommate situations or how you navigate sort of issues with your neighbors, right? So this is the community boards is providing that service, and that's been helpful. And we needed to improve and expand the financial literacy we were offering to young people. So we're doing that through the Office of, what's it called, Kathy?
Financial empowerment.
Thank you, Jackie. Financial empowerment. I can never remember. So that's out of the city treasurer's office. And we needed to expand our behavioral health supports. No surprise, right? The pandemic's been hard on all of us. It's been particularly hard on young people who are experiencing homelessness or were previously homeless. We also needed to take a look at the sort of case management ratios, particularly in the housing program. So Brilliant Corners was operating with about a 50 young people to 1 case manager ratio, and young people just need a lot more support. So we needed to shift that. And then we really needed to do some more deep work around problem solving and prevention and expand those options for young people. So that resulted in an increase from a $35 million campaign to a $50 million campaign. We are getting close to reaching our goal. We have about $3 more million to raise on the private side for that, and about 12 million that we think will come from public funding to get us to that $50 million goal. All right, let's move. Let's take this down so we can see each other. And I'm going to ask Jackie to just talk a little bit about sort of what you've seen with the roommate, any of the new and enhanced services, or just talk about sort of from your perspective and 5 Keys perspective, and maybe tell us a little bit about 5 Keys and their work, and then what you've seen over the past year or two as we've been rolling this program out.
Sure. Thank you so much, Sherilyn. Yes, I can start with a little bit about 5 Keys. So 5 Keys has been around for over 15 years now. And we are in a little bit of everything. So we have taught in the jails in custody to help bring education to those in jail. We also help manage some of the shelter-in-place hotels, as well as help house people through these rapid rehousing programs. And those are just a few of some of the things that 5 Keys gets into these days. I did want to talk a little bit more about the individual experience with rapid rehousing. We have several clients who have had so many successes throughout these last 2 years, but I do want to highlight David. So David is somebody who came to us at a time when his brother had just passed away. So he had a twin brother who had passed away from an overdose, and it was very unexpected. And they are identical twins. So, or they were identical twins, I should correct myself. And so during that time, he found himself homeless. He was very disconnected from his family. Anytime he showed up around the neighborhood, people confused him for his brother who had passed away. So David was constantly being re-triggered in his family, in the community, and just anywhere he went. This kind of really impactful situation would come up constantly. So David ended up drinking a lot, and he is in working on his sobriety right now. But during the time when he came to us, we were having issues trying to center him, because not only did he have a loss, but then he had a baby on the way. So he has a beautiful daughter, and his relationship with his his partner was deteriorating significantly. And because of the services that Rising Up provides, such as behavioral health, right? Because we were able to connect David to a therapist in a timely manner. So generally it takes about 3 months in the regular system to connect somebody to behavioral health, but because of the money and the funding, the private-public partnership that Rising Up has, we were able to access services for David within 3 days for his behavioral health support. At that point, he wasn't ready to commit to meeting with a counselor consistently. So we ended up going another route and saying, okay, we know you're not ready to talk about these issues, but we do know we have to prepare you to be stable in your housing. We don't want you to return to homelessness. So we partnered with the Office of Financial Empowerment and got him some coaching, and he was able to open up a bank account, start saving, which in turn encouraged him to start drinking less, therefore showing up to work every day. And so David was really a clear example of how all these little pieces have come together. Sorry, there's an airplane. Let me put myself on mute really briefly. Zoom pauses are a little extra awkward because no one's talking. But okay, so back to David. We leveraged community boards as well. So community boards was also used in the conflict resolution with his partner because he was drinking so much, he lost his job, did not have, money coming into the baby. His partner had moved on and moved away and taken visitation from David. So during this process of getting David back together, we were able to reunite through community boards, the two partners. They have a really great relationship now. David is seeing his daughter consistently. He's working, and he will be officially stably housed. I think his lease ends in about 2 months. So I just wanted to share David's story. I also wanted to highlight the importance of this type of partnership because I do work on another rapid rehousing program that is an adult side, and because the funds.
That's great. Jackie, just pop back in when you can. I just really, that is such a touching and heartwarming story and really speaks to the high caliber work that Five Keys does. And we're just so, I think that's just a really remarkable story about both David as well as the support he receives from your team and you.
Yes, there we go. Yes, I actually see the work similar to like what an ER triage is like when someone comes in with some pain points and the ER kind of rushes in and there's different people that do different pieces of this work. It was very similar to that when working with David because we were able to tap in as needed to therapy, to financial support, to community boards, and seeing David come out on the other side. He is nowhere near homelessness now. He's far from it. And we're hoping that he's able to stay that way moving forward.
That's great. That's so great. And Doric, I saw you come on to the video. Is there anything you want to add, Doric? I want to give you a shot. He's also from Five Keys.
No, nothing to add. Sorry, I did not want to step on Jackie's presentation. Just I would just personally want to just extend my appreciation to all of the Five Keys case managers who are just an amazing team. And I think one of the things that I think our Rising Up youth benefit from are having just super caring and approachable adults who are there as like mentors. They're not just there to meet them in an office, but they'll go wherever the youth needs them to go, to meet them wherever they're at. They'll go as an advocate if a landlord's treating them poorly, if I could say politely, in some ways egregiously. They're there to advocate for them. They're there to push back on our city friends, you know, and who may have well-intentioned policies, but and procedures in place that don't necessarily always meet the needs of some of the young adults who are most at risk, and so are there to advocate for their clients. And so I just want to say it's the human, it's that human touch, and it's really hard to find staff, and I think that who can kind of get into the trenches to do this work and are willing to stick with it. And we've been lucky to have a pretty consistent, steady team in place. And I also want to just give a shout out to at the Crossroads, who really helped us figure this out in the beginning. We subcontracted with them and partnered closely with them to help us figure out how to do case conferencing, how to meet clients where they were, how to get outside of our normal way of doing business in sort of classrooms or in transitional shelters or in offices, and really getting into the neighborhoods, into the streets to provide that service. And I think just the partnership with the other CBOs and having regular touch points has also been a huge strength to this program. We're not operating in a silo, but we're really operating in partnership, and that has been critical, especially during COVID, when this is how we have meetings. Having multiple organizations and sort of parallel partners in the work has also been, I think, critical in helping us feel less alone in the work. So that's all. That's my 2 cents. Thank you, Jackie. You're awesome.
Thanks, Derek. Jackie, when we were preparing for this Zoom, you said some really, I thought, inspirational and had really thoughtful comments about sort of what the youth rapid rehousing, so what Rising Up, why you thought it was such an important intervention, and what you were sort of seeing as working well with young people, as well as sort of why you thought it was important to have this intervention. I wonder if you could speak to some of that.
Absolutely. So prior to working with Rising Up, I was actually working in custody at the time, down in the downtown San Francisco jail, and we didn't have that gap. So we would be in the jails working with our clients, and they'd be like, "Hey, Jackie, I've been in the jail for about 10 years now. I'm 27. I went into juvie when I was 17, and I've been in and out of juvie since then. I really don't have a place to call home. I have nowhere to go." And so there was this gap where we could connect them to send them to get an assessment, but we really didn't know the follow through and what happened. And so Rising Up was able to fill that gap. So when we were able to work with this collaborative, we were now able to say, "Hey, Gabriel Ortega, since you've been in the system for a decade now, we are able to get you an assessment. We are able to support you on the outside." And so it allowed for a soft landing for someone like Gabriel, who had watched his father pass away, also from an overdose, who has been chronically incarcerated. And so he is actively in our program now, but this Rising Up was that bridge. In addition to that, to having that bridge for people that were in custody or just coming out of, bad situations, I've noticed a really big difference between our adult rapid rehousing program and our youth rapid rehousing. And on the youth end of things, it feels malleable, meaning we get a youth, and yes, they've had maybe 7 to 10 years worth of not so great experiences. But then when we get them and we start saying, "Hey, we've got all these tools. You've got some trauma around this. You need harm reduction strategies. Here you go. You need this. Here you go." Once we start handing them these tools, I'm able to see them transform and change into healthier people, versus our adult side, it's a little different. So we have people who have been chronically homeless for like 20, 30, 40 years, and it's a stark difference, right? Day and night. Getting someone who has these years, decades of homelessness to kind of do that change is not as straightforward as the youth side, where we have these tools available to us.
That's great, Jackie. I think I could listen to you talk all day about the work and about the amazing folks' lives that you touch. Obviously, you are quite powerful at what you do. But I also want to give a chance for people who are here to ask questions. I would just say, I think one of the best parts about Rising Up for me has really been the things that Doric and Jackie have talked about, which is really the collaboration and the connections, the way that like 5 Keys is now a youth housing provider and got support from At the Crossroads as they were rolling that out, that case managers and program managers have been working directly with the city and county to address and to help to build the right kinds of policies for us to serve young people in Rising Up. To look at things like, when do we do a subsidy extension? How do we help young people? Like, what's the way we're all going to organize how folks are going to, how much they're going to pay at what rate to their as a part of their rent as they're getting to, so that they can increase the amount of rent they're paying so that they're decreasing the subsidy. When do we need to do subsidy extensions? What other kinds of services do we need to bring in? What are the things that are just really not working in the city that need to be changed? How can we, and we're doing that collectively and together. And that is really, I think, one of the best parts of Rising Up. And we're learning collectively from our, like, what's not going well, right? I don't want to pretend that this has been a super smooth process, right? Lots of learning, but we're doing it together. So that's been really great. All right, so I'm going to open it up for questions. I saw one in the chat. Yes, I'm going to, is there a program that gets young people connected with continuing education? We have, Jackie, do you want to take that one?
Yes. So in our case management, we do connect all clients and give them the opportunity to continue their education, whether they're still working at their GED or high school diploma. 5 Keys is also a school, so we can funnel them to our school or to others as needed. But we also have a college and career team. Crystal and Rob are not on the call today, but they are our bridge to continuing education, and they have different programs in various fields across different counties that can help the youth.
We, 5 Keys has also been instrumental in helping Larkin Street build out some of its education programs. And one of the lessons that we did learn, we initially had funded on the education and employment side, and really focused on the employment side. We funded through the private dollars sort of one position to sort of work with all of the partner organizations to support on the employment side, build relationships with other employment programs, and have, sort of have warm handoffs. And because many of the young people that are in Rising Up are not housed solely in San Francisco, right? They're also housed in other counties. And that worked fine until COVID, and then that didn't work so well. And so one of the things that we did was, as the anchor institution, the steering committee is sort of the governance body for Rising Up, is put out an RFP, basically a solicitation to all of the housing providers to ask for what they might need, what additional funding they needed to support education and employment. And then we received those proposals and reviewed them. And so there has been some additional funding granted to the housing partners for education and employment support, so that they could really tailor what those services and supports needed to be for the young people that they were serving. And we have a lot of work to do on education. Just as a note, right? Like City College, Zoom didn't go so well for a lot of young people. In San Francisco, we have the homelessness person that's supposed to be in the school district to support young people, unaccompanied minors, and folks experiencing homelessness and families. That position is unfilled. the voicemail is full, you can't get help. So we have a lot of work to do in San Francisco and beyond to address the educational impacts and learning loss on older high schoolers and 18 to 24-year-olds. Are there other questions or anything else?
Sherilyn, could I ask a question?
Of course, Rob.
I'm curious, does Rising Up have the funding and infrastructure to do long-term tracking in terms of, housing stability a year after the subsidy ends, 2 years, 3 years, or does it not have the funding or evaluation mechanisms to be able to do that?
I'd say that's a yes and a no. So we don't have specific funding to do long-term follow-up as a Rising Up as an entity, but because all of the young people that are in Rising Up are a part of the one system in the city, if young people, so each organization may have follow-up that they're doing, right? And ways that they track the clients they serve for follow-up, right? Across their organizations, but within the one system, part of the reason to have everybody who's this idea of a by name list and everybody who's experiencing homelessness in the city to get to this into the one system is so that we will see if folks return to homelessness. So if they return to homelessness in San Francisco County, then we would have that information, right? That would show up. It would show up in HSH's system, and then that's where we could start to see if there was like a return to homelessness. What we're trying to get to is the not return to homelessness. There are limitations to that because some young people are living outside of San Francisco, so we might not know. So that's a sort of yes and no. I think individual organizations are tracking, and we will know through the one system if they return to homelessness into the one system in San Francisco.
Do you know whether or not, like at HSH, there's interest in, I don't know, at some kind of benchmark date, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, kind of looking at this cohort and seeing whether or not and how they did return to the one system?
It's a great question. I would imagine yes, in all of the evaluation that HSH is going to want to do across all of the housing interventions that are being scaled right now, that they would want to be able to do that. I think HSH is probably, really, they're trying to get it's probably right now they're like, yeah, we can get to that as soon as we get the rest of these positions filled and actually scale and get out the door, all of the things. But I think it's a great question, and I think we can take that on as a steering committee and work with HSH. And I know one question that comes up a lot about Rising Up is like, hey, it's this 50% reduction. What are you going to do after that, right? And really, we intend to continue to try to scale. What this tells us for across the youth homelessness response system, we are trying to better understand what are the interventions that young people need. Some young people, rapid rehousing is not the right intervention. So we've also pushed to have longer term subsidies for young people that need that, and more PSH, permanent supportive housing for young people, as well as to continue to have transitional and other kinds of housing interventions. So that ultimately what we will know is how much of what kind of services do we need to get to that rest of that 50%. And the numbers are going down. We very much expect to hit our goal of reducing youth homelessness by 50% by 2023. Miriam, I think you're up next. We just have 3 more minutes unless folks want to hang past the 12:45 time.
Thanks, Sherilyn. Thank you all for being here as a community member in San Francisco. I am just grateful to have such passionate members in our community like Sherilyn and Jackie and Derek and Gail and Kathy to really be part of the Rising Up and moving the efforts forward. Mental health, as I was thinking through what has been accomplished thus far and the past tumultuous kind of unprecedented year of being part of the quarantine and COVID and trying to step out of it. We all know that mental health concerns are huge. Is a huge crisis, and it will be so short-term and long-term, especially for young adults, especially for the youth that we are trying to support, especially for those who haven't had the safe environment and support and family members around them as we have been able to provide our own kids. So the way that I usually think about this is, what would we do for our own children? What would we do for the young members of our own family? And some of these youths, as we know, haven't had the similar support as we have been able to provide our own kids. And that is a concern, again, that will have to be addressed, obviously, but is a concern short-term and long-term, and something that we may have to face for a long period of time. So it makes the efforts of Rising Up even more important to make sure that we get every single youth to a safe and protective environment that they can be out of the long-term homeless environment. So I feel very proud of being part of this, and for all the work that has been accomplished thus far. And $50 million seems like a big number, but if you break it down to the number of kids that Sherilyn was talking about, to the 3-year program that we ask everyone to participate in, it actually becomes a very small number per youth. I think under $40,000 per youth, which, if you think about, it's less than what we would cost to send one young adult to college, to university. So this is an interesting way to kind of think about it. And it's amazing for us to have accomplished as much in reaching our goal, under 4 million to achieve. And a way that everybody can participate is to think about how there may be some connections or other members in our community who would be able to participate in supporting us as part of these efforts. I think any type of guidance that we can get in being able to have an outreach to other members of the community, to organizations who we may not have thought about, and may have this as part of their passion in wanting to support, we would be grateful, and we would love to hear from you. So with that, I'm going to just give it back to you, Sherilyn, to take questions, and thank you.
Thank you, Miriam. Well, we are at 12:45, and I try to, I know everybody loves Zoom and wants to stay on it all day, but we try to hold to the time commitment. So I will just say thank you to all of you for joining. Jackie, it's been a joy to spend time with you here and in the prep meeting. And thank you for all you're doing. And so grateful 5Qs is part of this journey with us. And thank you all, Kathy and Nicole and Miriam and everybody. I hope you all have a splendid day, and we will see each other soon.
Thank you to all of you. Thank you. Bye.
Everyone.